Welcome to the Strategic Veteran, where we chart the course from service to civilian triumph. I'm Adam Peters, a veteran, entrepreneur, and your fellow navigator in the quest for a life of impact and fulfillment. My mission is simple: to empower you with the tools and stories that turn challenge into opportunity. Having walked the path from active duty to where I stand now, I understand the search for purpose that comes with hanging up the uniform. It's a path I've walked, with its trials, its tribulations, and its victories, and it's a journey we're on together. This podcast is more than just conversation. It's a beacon for those seeking to redefine our missions through entrepreneurship. It's about igniting the entrepreneurial spirit that lives within us, the spirit that compels us to create, lead, and make our mark on the world. Here we connect with veterans who have built businesses, sparked change, and found their purpose in the marketplace of ideas. They're not just surviving, they're thriving. They've transformed their service into startups, their experiences into enterprises, and they're proof that you can too. So whether you're scribbling business plans on napkins or stepping into the arena of innovation, remember, you're not alone. You're in good company. So let's explore these stories of transformation and take the first steps together on our path to purpose. Let's begin. What's up, everybody? Welcome back to the Strategic Veteran. I'm your host, Adam Peters, and today we have the honor of speaking with Derek Keller, a highly decorated combat veteran and distinguished entrepreneur whose journey exemplifies resilience, leadership, and strategic thinking. Derek served 4 impactful years in the Marine Corps, reaching the rank of E4 while stationed at Camp Lejeune with the 3/8 Weapons Company, CAAT Platoon, and the 2nd Tanks Scouts. His military service included intense and transformative experiences, such as serving in Iraq, where he faced the loss of his comrades and the profound impact of combat. Transitioning from military life, Derek initially found himself feeling lost and broken. However, his resilience led him to a successful career in auto sales, where he rose to the position of vice president. His entrepreneurial spirit then drove him to start his own consulting business, buy and scale a lab, and eventually sell it. Today, Derek continues to coach other businesses, applying his core values of selfless, discipline, and toughness to help them achieve success. Derek is also the founder of Battlefield Boardroom, a program dedicated to helping military veterans transition effectively into civilian life. His personal journey through trauma and triumphs, combined with his professional accomplishments, make him a beacon of inspiration for veterans and entrepreneurs alike. Join us as we delve into Derek's incredible story, exploring his military service, transition challenges, and the entrepreneurial ventures that have shaped his life. Let's dive in and warmly welcome Mr. Derek Keller, a true embodiment of what it means to be a strategic veteran. Derek, thanks, man, so much for being here. I really appreciate it, and I'm super grateful, brother.
Thanks for having me, man. It's definitely a pleasure to be on here. I've heard a lot of good things about this show and a lot of good things about what you're doing. So,
well, I love that, man. That means that I'm doing it right. If everybody keeps telling me they're hearing a lot of good things, and this is our. We met briefly before, if I recall, and asked you if you wanted to do the show, and so here we are. So let's just dive in, man. Let's start with where you grew up and kind of what inspired you to join the military, my friend.
Oh shoot, man. It's crazy. Most people have like this crazy story of something happening inside of their life where they end up wanting to be a Marine or something like that. But basically, I grew up in Rock Springs, Wyoming, small town. My aunt was actually a Marine. She went to the Marine Corps and she ended up being a MP. Had the dog, sending pictures. It was really cool, and from a young age, that's what I wanted to be. She ended up transitioning over to the Army and being a combat medic, but she was she was a Marine first. So
yeah, for sure. So did you just always knew Marine Corps? That's what it was? Because most of the Marines I talk to, it's always like, I want to be a Marine because I saw the guy at a parade in the uniform, and that uniform just did something to me.
Right. It's basically kind of like that, but it was just like, the way that my aunt exemplified and explained what the Marines were when she was in, it was just like, that's who I wanted to be. I wanted to be the best of the best. I wanted to be, when people said Marine, they thought a certain standard, right? And that's kind of where I fell at. I was like, I knew that I needed a high level of discipline. My dad was in the Navy. My grandpa was in the Air Force. Everybody, I guess my step grandpa, my dad's grandpa passed away when he was 5, or my dad's dad passed away when he was 5, but step grandpa. So like everybody, like there was this service, this certain level of service in the family, and it just seemed like that's where I needed to be.
Now, growing up in Wyoming, was there any element of just wanting to get out? Like, because there wasn't, because I grew up in Poseyville, Indiana, and we had a brief conversation about being Colts fans and Notre Dame fans, and for me, the options are really like farm or be a teacher or work the local businesses. Nobody really teaches you about entrepreneurship. Nobody, it was expected that you would go to college. However, that was just not, and I hated school. I kept my grades up to play sports. So I just knew I wanted out. And I'm curious, coming from, you're the first person I've talked to from Wyoming, and I've done like 40 of these so far. So that's, first of all, that's really cool. I know there's some really good kept secrets, like Jackson Hole is a big like playground for the rich, but I assume you didn't grow up in Jackson Hole, Wyoming.
No, Southwest Wyoming, and there's a lot better places than Jackson Hole to tourist travel.
I'll take your word for it, because I've driven through Wyoming twice on my trip from Savannah to Fort Lewis, and then back from Fort Lewis to here in Florida. So that's my experience with Wyoming. I claim to know nothing about it.
Yeah, I could definitely show you some places out there, but yeah, there was this sense of like wanting to do something different, because everyone grew up and either ended up on the farm, ended up in the mines, or ended up in the oil field. And I watched my dad go through like the layoffs of the mine. My brother and my dad are both in the mines. My grandpa was in, like everybody went to the mines. And then the oil field, you all know how the oil field goes. And farming, again, you see the ups and downs and the cycles and everything that farmers go through. So it was like I wanted something different. I wanted something different for myself. I kind of had this vision for myself of changing the stars of our family, right? I wanted to do something different.
I love that, man. So what ended up being your job in the Marine Corps? Did you get to pick it, and were you satisfied with it?
So when I went and did the ASVAB and everything like that, the Marine Corps wanted me to do, counter intel and some other stuff. And I really, really I thought Marine, and I thought, I had to be infantry. I had to be a grunt. Right. So I went 03 open when I went in. And then because of the ASVAB scores, they made me go tow. So I was 0352, ended up a tow gunner. Getting in and going to the fleet, I ended up with 3-8 Cat platoon, which is a combined anti-armor platoon. And then from there, I dislocated my shoulder and couldn't deploy to Okinawa with them. So when they went to Okinawa, they left me back and switched me over to 2nd Tank's Scouts, which Scouts is basically just another Cat platoon. Just we're forward reconnaissance for the tanks, right? Except for we run in Humvees, where Army runs in Bradleys, and they wear some weird cowboy hats and stuff like that.
No. That's not the infantry guys. That's the Cav Scouts. I want to correct you right there, because there is a giant issue between us. But no, I totally get what you're saying. So in the Marine Corps, it's structured just like a light infantry unit in the Army. You guys have a tow platoon that's anti-armor. I assume you had Humvees there as well, right?
Yep.
Yeah, that's a big thing at like Fort Drum, I think, and definitely the 82nd for us. I was never light. I was a Bradley guy, dismount. So Bradley's a really cool piece of equipment, though. So,
yeah.
And moving on to your deployment. So, you were only in for 4 years, but you were in, I assume your deployment was the invasion. Am I correct in that assumption?
Yep. We were with RCT-5 and did the initial attack. We breached the border. I was sitting there guiding people across the border because we had a big dust storm with my night vision with the thermal sights on the tow. I was guiding people across the border. Then, transitioned up and set up the first screen line where we had droves of people just surrendering.
Mm-hmm. I heard all those stories, because I got to my unit, like, I don't know. I think if you figure leave like really 2 weeks after those guys got home from the invasion. And so I want to pick your brain, because you're the first person I've actually gotten a chance to talk to that was a part of the Marines while they were on the invasion. So Third ID, the way I understood it, and the way I was told, they were the ones that basically got to the airport. So what was the Marines role like? Like, were you next to those guys? Like, I want to kind of understand it because it's like I feel like a piece of history that I lost, even though I served during that time.
Yeah, so we did the initial, or we were the front of the front. Like, I don't know if you remember the Blue Force trackers they had.
Oh yeah, yeah.
We were in front of everybody. So like our platoon led the entire invasion all the way up to Tikrit, and then came back. And so we went through the air defense base when the Army went over to the airport.
Got it. So did you guys probably part ways maybe at like the Karbala Gap kind of deal? Is that how that went? Or was it even further north than
They were
that?
running behind us, and we had some people sweeping up to the right, some people sweeping up to the left, and then we kind of beelined up through the middle. We went out through Sadar City, but then came up over the top. And I mean, I was there when they were pulling down the statues and doing all that. It was pretty crazy. But
Let's
then
talk about how that deployment shaped you as a young Marine. And I'm sure there's a lot of stuff that you carry with you today that you even probably either use to fuel what you're doing, or you lean on the leadership lessons, or some of the skills you built in dealing with that deployment. And I'm really curious to hear how that deployment shaped you, because I'm used to talking to, no offense to you, but guys with longer careers who did multiple deployments like myself. Maybe I did 4. I did 3 to Iraq and 1 to Afghanistan, so there's a lot of shaping going on there. But that invasion, I can't speak to it because I wasn't there. I was still basically in high school when all that was going down. And so all I have is the stories of the leaders who were on it, and the embellishments of some of the Joes from when I got to the platoon. So I really do want to get your side of it and hear how that experience shaped you.
um, yeah, it was pretty hectic, man. I mean, like when we were going up in the I guess the difference between our deployments, between like yours and mine, was it was easier for us to identify enemy, right? Where you guys had a lot of guys that were in civilian clothes, and a lot of suicide bombers, a lot of IEDs. We didn't have a lot of IEDs and stuff like that. When we went up through the I remember a platoon of army guys coming up in their Bradleys and pulling off to the side of us, and they had jumped out and walked into this field and caught some of the, I can't remember what the damn bombs called that we would drop that would have all the little mini bombs in them.
Yeah, I know what you're talking about. I forget what it's called too.
But we watched them get out, and as they come out and circle out around, a couple of them stepped on them things and blew themselves up. So like the experience was a little different because we didn't have the IEDs. Towards the tail end, when we were in retrograde, the IEDs started to come, and suicide bombers started to come. But for the most part, we could identify who our enemy was going up through.
Yeah, because it was a traditional force on force. You were fighting, the Iraqi army at the time, Saddam's army. I forget what they called them, but uniforms, definitely equipment. I remember hearing our tankers talk about just destroying their tanks and all of that. And I can remember, those Bradley guys very, very likely were probably the Third ID guys from the battalion that I would end up going to. And those guys would tell me stories about just bodies littering the desert, they were no match for us. Is that your
Right.
experience as well?
Yeah, until we got into Baghdad, then things started getting a little bit more serious. But going up, we'd catch RPG fire. We'd get in a couple little firefights all the way up. I mean, we went from bottom to top in 21 days. So I mean, we were moving at a clip, right? And when we got up into Baghdad, they'd hired this militia that was all in black pajamas and coming out of everywhere. But we had, gosh dang, there was the Taliban was there. They weren't. The Ba'ath Party was there, but it wasn't like it was later, right? It was more. they were pretty easily identified. They weren't really sneaky. They were just jumping up. They'd ambush us every once in a while, but it wasn't. It was very easy to identify them once things broke out, right?
It's crazy how different the fights between what you experienced and what I experienced were, because there was no identification. Like if you didn't catch them red-handed, like, you have no idea.
Well, right, and I mean, so like going to that, like our ROEs, our ROEs stayed the same, going all the way through and back. You guys, the Army's ROEs changed when we started. When we were in retrograde, you guys' ROEs changed to where you guys had to be directly fired upon to return fire, and so we would go down into um, the base, the border bases, and escort you guys up into Iraq when we were in retrograde. So we would escort you guys up in because you guys couldn't return fire. So we would basically return fire, then you guys would volley and jump in. But it was a shitty situation. I don't know why they did that.
Well, we're not here to talk about the terrible decisions that our government likes to make, but you mentioned experience some losses, and also I think there's another element to that deployment. At least what I can recall from the guys that were telling me stories is, first of all, that deployment is different in that I assume you guys were told you're going to do this thing in Iraq, but there's no end date. You have no idea when you're coming home. That's completely different from when I, was deploying. I always knew when I was coming home and generally had orders to go on the next one before I even got home, which is whatever. But I want to paint a picture of how I think we, particularly as infantry guys or combat arms guys, build that resilience that, is a foundation of, what you do today. And I think ultimately a foundation of finding purpose again after service is being resilient, and how those losses and that, aura of not knowing how long you're doing this shaped you into the resilient person that you are.
Yeah. So going over there was no return date. That we had no idea when we were coming home. The I guess I'm a little different than a lot of other people, where I completely shut off communications. I told everyone, hey, like, you guys can write. I'm not going to read it. I'm not going to engage. I'm not going to send you letters back. Um, I had this way of thinking where I didn't want any distractions, right? I wanted to lead my guys. I wanted to be in the fight. I didn't want anything getting in my way. So and that's something that I've kind of carried with me, where like when I get into something, I shut everything else off, and I just kind of I kind of get in a mode and just start building and start going. And I feel like, part of that's from the training that we went through. Then the other part of it is, the good old saying, if the Marine Corps wanted you to have a wife, they'd issued you one.
Yeah.
Type thing, So I just felt like, I dedicated and signed the contract, and I was going to give all of me to the Marine Corps. So when I was in that situation, it was very easy to shut off, and which also hurt me coming home, because I'm very easy coming home. I'm still very quick to just shut people off. Like, okay, it's not serving me, go away. Like it's not moving in this certain way. Okay, I'm done, go away. Right. Like, so it hurt me in that way, because like with relationships and trying to get through things with my kids, and trying to figure out how to really navigate civilian life, you can't just shut people off and go your own way.
Right. That's an interesting approach. I sometimes wish I would have taken that approach, cutting off comms with, the outside world or whatever, because, it becomes this, like, they want you to call every so often to know that you're okay. But it's like, you don't understand. I mean, the early days calling cards, and whatever they paid for a calling card, you would get about a quarter of the minutes, right? I'm sure you remember that. And then when they finally set up MWRs, it's hours to wait in line to go call people, because there's people who cannot go without speaking to their family every single day, which I'm not here to judge. That's not for me. But for me, it just became redundant. I don't want to waste all this time. I could be, talking to the dudes, or planning the next mission or whatever, or just getting focused for the next patrol, instead of waiting in line for 2 hours to call home to talk about stuff that I can't even talk about.
Oh, dude, when we were in Kuwait, so like, just to give you an idea of like how it was when we got there, Camp Fox, which is like was like a whole base when we came back. But when we got there, it was my platoon with 2-man tents, and we dug a fighting hole around it, right? Trenched in around it, and that was it. So we had no phones, no bathrooms, no anything, right? When we came back, there was all the big Haji tents, all the foam booths, the air conditioning, showers. There was none of that when we left, so it was pretty cool to come back and see what all they built. But it definitely was a lot different. As far as I remember we got one sat phone call when we were in Baghdad, after we had already came back and were in retrograde from Tikrit. But then, so we got one sat phone call, and then we didn't get another call until we got back to Kuwait, and then we were getting ready to, like, we packed up our Connex boxes and ready to go.
Sounds about how I remember people telling me the stories. Oh, you're going home, congratulations, pack your shit, right? Mm-hmm. like that's awesome, man. So you get done with that deployment, and I assume that's late 02 or late 02. So you get out in 03. What was the decision to get out?
So it was late 03, because we did the initial attack March.
That's right. My timeline's off. I should know that, because I graduated basic training in October and reported in October of 03. So
yeah, so we came back, and I mean, just getting back, it was there. When we first came back, there was really, it was time to get out, right? We had 6 months of psych evals and stuff like that, and then we get I ended up barracks NCO, because I decided not to re-enlist. I guess the reason why I decided not to re-enlist was I had a bunch of outside influence of people telling me, just come home. My re-enlistment package was like $5,000 sign-on bonus, and everybody back home was like, making over $100K a year and working half the year in the mines. So like, you only work half the year and make over $100,000, and you don't get shot at. I was like, well,
it's pretty enticing.
It's like, all right, well, I'll come try that. My grandpa actually convinced me to coming down into Vegas for a little while to go be a cop. And I went to the police academy, started going through all that, and got down to, there was like 880 of us, got all the way down to almost graduating. And then they came back and said my psych evals came back and labeled me PTSD, which put me as a liability, and they couldn't have me on the police force. So I thought, well, going from the Marine Corps to the police force would be a good transition, because I'd still have that brotherhood. And then that kind of got blown up. So then it was, okay, back to Wyoming. And to get on at the mines, it's a 3-month long hiring process. So you kind of start the process, and I was like, well, I was going to go work construction for a little while in between. And one of my buddies came up and said, oh, just come try selling cars. And I was like, you're freaking crazy, man. There's no way I can go sell cars. I don't want to talk to people. Like, I just want to go buy a cabin in the woods and never see another soul. We went back and forth for a while. He finally convinced me to come sell cars. And I was like,
and that worked out well for you, huh?
Well, I mean, at first it was awful. Like I hated every second of it. It was I mean, imagine, I mean, going from the, high honor, the, integrity, honor, like of the Marine Corps, where everybody has your back and everybody's willing to die for you, to like the most cutthroat place that you could possibly be, where everybody's lying, everybody's, it's just this place of people that are full of shit and treat you like shit. So it was a complete 180 from what I was used to.
And I love that you just touched on that, because you've touched on a couple of things that I think lead to what I call the transition hole, or falling just into that dark place. And it's A, the loss of brotherhood, B, the loss of purpose. There's several other things that go into it. You've touched on those two things. And I think it's important for people to understand you're not the first person that's gone into a sales role after you get out of the military. I did the same thing. I just did it in what I would consider a dirtier business, in the insurance industry. I was knocking doors selling final expense to seniors. So it was as scummy as you can possibly imagine. And I hated every minute of it. It just didn't align with who I am as a person. And so, I relate to you a ton in that, because, even me as a consumer, I hate the car buying process. It's just a fucking headache, man. It's like, we don't need to play these games. Like, here's my number. Either you can or you can't make it happen. You don't need to keep me here for half of a day running back and forth, bullshitting with your, I know what you guys are doing in there, because I did the same thing in insurance, right? And so I'm glad you touch on that stuff.
Yeah, my I was 2 months into the car business, and I hated every second of it. I had this old lady who came in that I had sold a brand new Pontiac Grand Am to, that her husband died in a car accident like right after they bought it, and she couldn't push the button on the to shift, so she needed a column shifter. And I went up to my manager and I was like, "Hey, man, like, she just bought this. I need to swap her out into something that she can actually use." And she can't do that. I was like, "What do you mean you can't do that?" And it was he says she's buried. And I was like, "Well, buried? What does buried mean? What does that mean?" He goes, "Well, you sold it to them for full MSRP. They own it. Like they've got a firm grip." And I was like, "Well, what does that mean? Like, how do I get this lady out? Like, her husband died, she can't drive it, she's crying out here. What do I do?" And they're like, "We can't do anything. You just got to tell her to go away." And I was crushed. Like, I felt like just like the biggest scumbag on the earth. And I got home that night, and my wife was at her dad's house. And I walk in, and I'm sitting there talking to my father-in-law about, like, I can't stand this place. This is not me. I can't do this. And I'm just going to quit and just finish trying to get on at the mines. And he's like, "Well, you could do that. Or," and I was like, "Or," he goes, "or you could get in a place to change it." He says, "Get yourself in a position to change the way that they work." And that intrigued me, right? It gave me another sense of purpose, another way to drive, another way to go, help somebody. And so shortly after that, I was a year in the car business, and I became a GM. I was the youngest GM that they'd ever had, with by far the least experience, I think. I had my own store, and I wanted to change everything. So that's what I did. I fired all the salesmen, and I created a position called a customer experience manager, where they would go out and they just needed to serve the customer, answer their questions, and take them on test drives, and just make their experience enjoyable. I went to a one price, where not so much, not one price where like, "Hey, we won't negotiate." It's one price as, "Hey, you know what? I've already done the negotiating for you. I've went out 500 miles and shopped the vehicle, like equipment, like vehicle, and I priced it in the top 5. I'm not always going to be the cheapest, but here, if you want to go shop me, here's the 5 other ones that are out there at these other dealerships. Here's their phone numbers. Call them." And I might have $100 or $200 to swing, but I don't have thousands. This is where it's at. And believe it or not, customers responded. We went from like a 20% closing ratio, 15 to 20%, to an 80% closing ratio. We were selling, we were selling from 60 to 80 cars a month. We went to selling 250 cars a month. And this is a small town. We had 35,000 people, and we were drawing in. We were the only Ford dealership in the nation to own 80% of its market. The biggest before that was 30 to 40%. So I mean, we were doing the right things, right? We were making money. Like, I would tell people, like, hey, we're running a business here. I have to make money. I don't have to make it all on you, but I do have to make money. And people understood, right? You were honest, upfront, transparent with them, show them where everything was at. The old go into the finance office and then all of a sudden your payment's higher. Did away with that as well. It was, hey, like, here's your car payment, and then if you want gap, warranty, this other stuff, here it is, right here on the showroom. You're not going to go back there and your payment's going to be higher. Like, this is your payment, this is your total, this is. And it was just a very transparent process where we put the sales managers out on the floor. Everything, we got rid of all the old, the Wizard of Oz behind the curtain where the guy would run back and forth. Got rid of all that. So sales managers were on the floor. We'd show screens. There was nothing to hide. Hey, we're making this much. This is where we're at. And people loved it. They thought it was the greatest thing ever.
Yeah, I think it's the greatest thing ever too, because like, what I hate is shopping for cars online and then just add at $5,000 to $7,000 to the price that you see on it, because there's all those hidden bullshit fees that they try to get you with. There are people in the industry, Car Edge comes to mind, who make a living off of teaching people how to negotiate their car deals because of all the dirty tricks that you guys, not you particularly, I know you worked hard to change that, and I commend you for that, but just the business as a whole, traditionally, the scams and all that shit that they run. And I was mind blown when I started learning about how to actually negotiate your car deal, and I think it's phenomenal. It sounds like you created the CarMax model before CarMax was actually a thing,
basically. And I mean, the cool thing is that we had such a huge response that the organization asked me to do it in all the other dealerships. So then I started traveling and opening up other dealerships and adding, and we'd put the process in place, and all the dealerships would just skyrocket. And it started to make you feel accomplished again. It started to make you feel like you had done something. And
you're
then,
genuinely helping people, right? Like, you're not just taking them for everything that you're worth. And that, I want to ask you, you said you fired the entire sales team, and I think I know why you did that. Did you put them on some kind of payroll or some kind of salary after that and do away with commission? I knew that was coming because I don't have anything against the commission only model, but I think that's what lends itself to the predatory behavior of salesmen, that shitty, scummy, just bullshit, cutthroat environment. Am I right in thinking that?
oh, 100%. No matter what, like, and that was kind of the problem. Is I tried to keep some of the salesmen, and it was still that, right? It was still just that constant cutthroat way of doing things, and it just didn't start to bleed into the others. And so it was just like, finally it was, I did a whole offsite hiring process where I put an ad in the paper for customer experience manager, and then interviewed people at a hotel. They didn't even know that they were going to work at a car dealership. And then we did training offsite, then brought them in. Just basically, you guys are out, these guys are in, and it just completely changed everything.
Now, while you're doing all of this inside of the dealership, realizing that you need to find purpose, you need to find that camaraderie and the brotherhood that you've lost from the core, what kind of transition issues are you dealing with? Substance abuse, suicidal ideations, thoughts, actions? What kind of stuff plagued you? You also, we haven't mentioned this yet, but you are a father of 7. I don't know how many kids you had at the time. I assume a few if you've got that many, because that's a lot of children. But I'm curious, like, how do you reconcile, all of that plus the issues of transitioning and essentially building a business for somebody that's not you?
Yeah, man. So basically, I dove straight into the business and let everything else go. Um, I siloed, right? I cut everything else off. I
That
would come home.
100% focus again.
Yeah, I would come home and I'd tell the excuse that probably a lot of guys that listen to this are using right now, which is I'd come home and I'd grab a glass of whiskey, fill it up, kick my feet up, turn on the television, and tell everyone, "Give me a minute. I deserve this. I work hard. I deserve this. I provide for you guys. I deserve this. I need my space. Yada yada yada." Right. And I kept doing that to the point where I didn't have any connections, right? So, like you were talking about the brotherhood, I didn't have any brotherhood. I didn't have any outlet. I didn't have any way to let go of anything besides I would sit and drink alcohol and watch television, right? That was my big sedations. Um, and that also transitioned into cheating on my wife, transitioned into, you know, anger issues. Like I was just angry all the time. I didn't know any other emotion besides anger. Like I was so messed up in that scenario. The funny thing is, it's not. I guess it's not funny at all. I had come home one night and I was kicking my feet up and drinking my glass of whiskey while my family was eating dinner behind me at the kitchen table. And my son, who was 3 at the time, told my wife that he didn't like dinner. And I don't know what snapped inside of me, but I came flying out of the chair. I ripped my son out of the seat by the back of his collar, threw him on the ground, and I'm shoveling food in his mouth. And it was like this out of body experience of like, I'm watching myself do it. I could see my wife up against the wall. Her eyes are big, like freaking out. My other kids are all up against the wall, spread out, like, what the hell? Like they just never experienced it. And at that point, that day when everything was done, that's when I decided that I was completely broken, that there was no fixing me, and that I needed to go ahead and commit suicide. Um, my my initial reaction was it was so close to Christmas that I didn't want to do it during Christmas. So I was going to wait uh, until Christmas was over. I felt like I'd been through the VA. I'd been going to their counseling sessions, which just made shit worse. So I stopped going. They kept putting me on these blood pressure medications they were supposedly PTSD medications, that I would see spots and like get tunnel vision because my blood pressure would get so low on these blood pressure medications. So I stopped taking them. So I felt completely broken and lost, and felt like there was nothing else that was gonna, nothing that was gonna fix me. And I went through, got done with Christmas, and was on the verge, and one of my buddies came up to me and showed me a video of a guy on a bridge in Vegas talking about driving race cars, doing cocaine, buying hookers, and doing all. And I was like, why the hell would you show me all this? Like, I don't even have time for that. I don't have time for that shit. Like,
Yeah, I'm checking out over here, and you're showing me party life. We're well past that.
yeah. How does that even transition? And but some just the way the guy spoke and the way that he was talking about things made me dive deeper, right? So I started diving deeper into some different videos and trying to find this guy and seeing what he was all about and where things transitioned for him. And I ended up finding this video of him in a gym throwing things around, just screaming and raging and throwing things around. And then he comes to the camera and says, everybody in your life told you it's not okay to be angry. I'm here to tell you it is. And I was like, well, wait a minute. So that then it started to intrigue me. It was like, okay, well, anger I can relate with. Anger I get down with. Like that is 100% me. I know anger. Me and anger are very, very friendly. And I ended up going to the program. It was Wake Up Warrior was the program. Had no affiliation to the military whatsoever. They weren't even out there for military. They were for high level business executives and business owners that were family men, married family men. And it was the whole program's about becoming 4-dimensional instead of 1-dimensional douchebag, right? So 1-dimensional douchebag is basically what I was. I was tied up in work, and that's all I wanted, right? So you go through a process where they teach you the core 4, and it's body, being, balance, and business, which is basically you need to exercise, get out and exercise, do things, get things up and out. Being, which is spirituality, right? So you need to meditate and pray, and journal. And then balance, which is your family, your wife, your kids, and then business, which is your discover and declare, learn something new every day and teach it to somebody. And then they taught me a tool called the stack, where in the stack you would go in and you would release the rage, right? So you would go in and just like really go all out and get all the toxic shit up and out. And then you would do a thing. I don't know if you ever heard of Byron Katie, but she has this thing called the turnaround. They basically had that incorporated in there, where you would look at the the original story, the me version, the opposite version of the story, and then your desired version. And then you would pick a story, right? Pick a story and go through with it. Like, hey, let's make this true. And then create action outside of it. So you were turning this rage and anger into production, into something good. And running through that program completely changed everything for me. So I ended up becoming a certified trainer with them. So I was working all day in the car business, and then I'd jump on the Zoom calls at night and coach other guys and teach them how to do things. But in that process, I went from working 17, 18 hours a day to working 17, 18 hours a day, 7 days a week, to working 9 to 5, 5 days a week. And I was still accomplishing everything, right? And then I got more engaged with my family. We were making more money than ever. We had everything was on fire. And I came to this point where it was either time to buy into the dealership or go on my own path. And at that point is where I launched Battlefield Boardroom and decided that I wanted to bring the stuff that I had learned at Warrior, where I became a trainer, to the veterans, right? So to bring it specifically to veterans and give veterans the same tools that I had to transition.
This brings a smile to my face, because thank you very much for sharing the vulnerability in your story. It gave me chills, tears in my eyes hearing you talk about the struggles, but then also you touched on a couple of other points that it's just strange, because finding out you're a Colts and Notre Dame fan, your grandfather was a running back at Notre Dame. I'm a huge Notre Dame fan. We have a lot more in common than I think either one of us would have ever guessed. But you being shown that video is a lot like a podcaster or a military influencer creator, Sean Ryan is my influence. I found him at my lowest point when he was talking about his psychedelic experience, which then led me to pursue mine, which then kind of gave me tools like you're talking about as well. The whole idea behind this podcast is, I think I don't think I know if I would have seen a show like mine on YouTube when I was drinking whiskey, smoking weed, and feeling sorry for myself and just wallowing in it, it would have changed my life then too. And clearly I'm not wrong, because you found another creator that did the exact same thing for you. The four that you talked about, here we have five: mental, emotional, physical, spiritual, and social. It's a MEPS. I can't take credit for coming up with that. Matthew Banco is another creator here on LinkedIn and out there doing his own podcast. He suggested that to me. We have a MEPS to get in, but we don't have a MEPS to get out. And those 5 areas really, really did change my life. And it started with getting the mental and the emotional in check, and then returning to the physical, having some kind of spiritual, and then being that social creature. Hell, I'm a professional networker at this point. Like, it's the coolest thing in the world. And then, you talked about working a 9 to 5 instead of 17 or 18 hours, and still having time to pursue your own thing at the end of it, which is something that everyone can do. And so it's like, brother, we're on the same path here. And it's like, it's really freaking cool to, have only spent about 15 minutes with you until we start doing this recording, and then just find out we have all these similarities.
Yeah. Yeah. It's incredible, man. And it just goes to show that, we can be on opposite coasts and different branches of the military, and still have the same story, essentially, that, hey, you know what? There's a point where you're going to break, and you've got a choice to either pursue something or take the other route, man. And it's so awesome to hear that there's so many different organizations that are coming up out there that are there to help guys transition, to help guys grow, to help guys get to the other side, right? And Wake Up Warrior, actually, they give me their software for free for veterans. So any veteran that wants to go through my program, rather than paying $1,200 a year for the software, they get it free. So it's pretty incredible, the things that they do for me, and that I'm able to continue to push out to other veterans. So,
well, I'm definitely going to take you up on that, because it's valuable tools that I can give to other transitioning veterans, because the tool set that I have with the mindfulness and the meditation and the yoga, I know it's not for everybody. I do know that it works, and that it's incredible when it does work. But if I can add more tools to my repertoire, why not? Right? Like, just the whole point of this is to help as many of us as we possibly can, because I can't do it anymore. The notifications every month to 2, 3, 4, 5 dead battle buddies, and it's senseless.
Well, the tough thing is, man, I mean, some of the best leaders in the world are sitting on the sidelines right now, thinking that they're broken. And I can't stand the thought that these guys are sitting out there when they should be running these Fortune 500 companies. They should be leading other men. They should be, they should just be out there taking the skills and everything that they were able to acquire and find purpose with it and go forward, right? So we also have a program called the Soul Purpose Roadmap, where we run people through finding their soul purpose and digging in and getting to the other side and helping them grow. And then I have another business called Exit Momentum, where we help businesses build the strategic vision, the execution, the leadership team, to give them the ability to expand and get outside of their business. Because so many people go into business thinking that they're going to get this life, and they end up buying a job, right? And they're working more than they ever did working for somebody else and making less money.
Yeah, no, it's cool that you have that other thing that helps people find their purpose, because that's so important. It's particularly for those of us who joined at a younger age or whatever. The military is really good at brainwashing you into that one purpose, and then it becomes your identity, and then you lose that when you get out. And it's just funny because I had Brandon Jenkins on the post. We've already on the podcast, we've released his episode, but his tier one coaching is the same thing. He calls it the blueprint, finding your blueprint, and that's what he walks guys through. And that's what ayahuasca did for me. It showed me what my purpose was. I will not claim to, I took the shortcut. I used the cheat code. However, there was a ton of work involved, before and after, and continues to this day. So you said you got to the point where it was either buy into the dealership or do your own thing. So how did you decide to do your own thing? And like, where does the entrepreneurial spirit come from? Did it come from, building those dealerships and seeing what you were capable of? You're like, I don't want to do this because I can't get close enough to the revenue, or did you just want to try something different?
So I had this story of nobody would take a car salesman, right? They're like the bastards of the salesman industry, right? So my initial decision was to buy into the dealerships, and I was literally just a couple days away from closing on a GM store, and the owner comes in and says, "Hey man, like, are you sure you want to spend the rest of your life in Rock Springs, Wyoming?" And it's mid-February at this point, so it's wind chill 60 below. I had just dug my driveway out, drifts higher than me. And I'm sitting in the showroom and I'm like, no, I don't. And he goes, "Well, I'll back you wherever you want to go. Where do you want to go?" So I made the overcorrection of coming to Phoenix. And, I was like, I never want to see winter again. I'm going to Phoenix. So I came down here to Phoenix and started looking and trying to find a dealership to buy. And the owner called me up and said, "Hey man, like, I'm in a bind. My brother just went out of trust in his dealerships. I need to bail him out. I need to help him out. So we're going to have to put this on hold, come back to Wyoming, and we'll just regroup and try again." And I said, "Well, I already bought a house down here. I'm feeling pretty good in the sun. I'm not really interested in coming back to the winter, so I'm gonna launch from here." So I initially started with leadership and sales, right? Like that's where I felt really good consulting. I felt like I had enough experience in both of them, between the Marine Corps, leading the car dealerships. I felt like I had some good leadership skills. And then sales, I'd been doing sales the whole time. So
You climbed the ladder in the sales industry,
right
there.
So I felt like I had a good background with sales, and I thought, I'm gonna do this. So I'm gonna go consult other dealerships on how to do what I did. Right. That was a big crash and burn.
Yeah, they didn't like you coming in there messing with their business, did they?
No, they didn't. They weren't willing to commit to it, and they all thought that they were too smart and didn't think that it was that they needed help, right? And thank God that I had a couple of buddies that decided to give me a shot inside of their organizations. I had a big SaaS company that was the first company to ever migrate companies to the cloud. They were a $500 million company, and they brought me in for leadership coaching. And that went really well. And then I picked up another SaaS company and another SaaS company. And I was like, wait a minute, like this doesn't make any sense. I'm a car guy. Like, nobody's supposed to hire me, right? And it just kept going, man. And I kept getting more referrals, and it just continued on. I ended up with this client that owned a cardiomyopathy lab, and I wanted them to diversify their lab and open and do an infectious disease, because they were all Medicare. And I figured we need to diversify a little bit, because if you're just here, then things can happen, right? Medicare switches on a dime. So we built out the infectious disease lab, and sure as shit, the second that we had it built out, we got a letter from Medicare saying that they were cutting cardiomyopathy. Um, and these guys were like, well, we've made a ton of money. We're just going to close it. I was like, well, what do you mean you're just going to close it? We built this whole thing over here so we didn't have to close. Like this was, they're like, no, we made enough money. We don't want to play anymore. So I was like, well, what will you sell it to me for? So I ended up buying an infectious disease lab that I had no experience in, um, that had never run a sample, and I didn't want to buy their, I think it's a PTAN is the Medicare number. I didn't want to buy their number because I didn't want to be caught up with any clawbacks or any bullshit that they had. So I just bought their equipment. So I had no name, no brand recognition, no anything. And we took the lab, started running samples, and ended up going from 0 to 10 million and sold it. Yeah, it was, but in that process, it was also, an opportunity for me to let go of my ego because I was the dumbest guy in the room. You're in a room full of scientists. You are by far the dumbest guy in the room. So
I'm so glad that you say that because as I embark on my journey building the strategic veteran, the stronghold, working with QRF up as the recruiting director, I constantly find myself the dumbest guy in the room, and it's a pretty cool spot to be in. I would say. Did you feel the same way? Like initially, you probably didn't. You were like, "Holy fuck, I'm not supposed to be here." But then you start spending more time in those rooms or on those calls, and you're like, "No, I'm fucking supposed to be here for sure." I just have to understand that there's a lot for me to learn, and that's okay.
yeah, it was really cool because I was able to. I didn't have to have a stranglehold on anything because I couldn't. Right, I had to trust. I had to lean into my people. I had to allow them to grow. I had to teach them what I knew, and be open to them teaching me something. Right, so it was how a leadership team's supposed to operate, and it was probably one of the best things ever for me because as I got into more business operating systems work, and training other businesses on operating systems and really putting the right things in place, it was a good thing to lean back on of like, hey guys, like I had all the ego and I thought that I knew it all, and I built this big organization, and going into this position was probably the best thing ever because it allowed me not only to grow the business, but to also grow the business the right way and not make it a job for me and make it sellable, right? Because so many entrepreneurs buy a business or open a business, and everything's tied up inside of them, the intellectual capital, the human capital, like everything, the structural, everything is them. So they're the product. You can't sell it or transition out of it, or if anything happens to you, death, divorce, disability, dysfunction, like any of these things happen to you, then the business goes down and your family suffers, right? So these guys, especially these veterans that are out there building these businesses, they think that they're hard chargers and think that they're doing the right things, but they miss the fact that, hey, everything relies on you, and if something happens to you, your family's fucked. Like they don't have anything.
Well, and there's a bigger point to that. It's like if it's so reliant on you, it becomes next to impossible to scale because you're only one person and you have limits, right? And so, while I think, and I may be wrong on this, and I'm not afraid to say that, I think it's fine for you to give everything, in the beginning, but keeping in mind, eventually it needs to not depend on you, right? Like I'm so early right now with the strategic veteran, everything is me and it has to be that way. But I'm building with foresight in a way that it won't be on me forever. In fact, the plan is that this thing will operate on its own and I'll have to do, maybe 10 hours a week, in the business. Like that's ideal, right? And so how did you, I assume you learned a ton of lessons, right? You had the ego death. You got put in check by, you know, let me buy this infectious disease testing like lab. I don't know anything. I'm not a physician. I'm not a scientist. What are your credentials? Do you have a degree? No degree. Do you have any kind of business certifications like Six Sigma, any of that stuff, project management?
Nope. I mean, I went through like EOS, Pinnacle, um, scaling up stuff, but I mean, for the most part, it's just hard lessons along the way.
And dude, and I'm so glad that you're open and honest about that. And I'm not trying to put you on the spot, but I am kind of trying to put you on the spot because I want other veterans that see this to understand you don't need all the fluff. I mean, yes, it helps, right? But you don't need to, well, I'm not a project manager. Well, you don't have to fucking be a project manager, but you do have to be willing to get your hands dirty and learn. And there's so much learning. And I think particularly, at least for me, when you start to learn and then you start to see it work, you just constantly want to learn more. And it becomes this fun little game that I play. It really is. Like if I take a meeting with somebody, whether that's through trying to recruit for QRF up or trying to find guests for this or be guests on another podcast or recruit people to the paid community, whatever that looks like, even if I'm not particularly excited by a conversation or the person doesn't really resonate with me, I always take a minute to reflect like, okay, what can I learn from this person? Because there's always something to be learned. I've learned a ton from you just in the 50 minutes we've been doing this. You know what I mean?
Well, thanks, man. Yeah, there's definitely. I mean that I've always. I guess that's kind of the same mindset I've always had. Is it doesn't matter who's in the room, doesn't matter how long they've been in the business or been in anything. You can always learn something from them. At every turn, there's something to learn from somebody.
So you emphasize selfless discipline and toughness as your core values inside of all of your business ventures. And for those listening, the man has got several. He's grown, scaled, built several different businesses to seven figures. I think is Battlefield Boardroom your big one right now?
No, Battlefield Boardroom is actually my small one because mostly it is donation. Like I do a lot of donating my time and it's more about purpose. That's like my heart project. That's the one
That's the passion project. Is Exit Momentum the moneymaker right now? Yeah, you guys have a beautiful website, by the way. I like that. I like your about me page. I did my homework, man. That's all I'm trying to say. Is like I did my homework, and no, discipline, man. That's the pillar that everything I'm building stands on. It's the one value that I think that you cannot compromise on. And for me, discipline is always there for me. It's never let me down, and it never will. Is that why you chose discipline as one of your core values inside of your companies?
Yeah, I mean, I feel like discipline. I mean, it's simply just doing the shit you said you were going to do, right? Like, right? Yeah. I mean, if you could just simply, I mean, imagine for a minute that you just did the shit you said you were going to do. Where would you be? Like, it's amazing what happens when you just simply do the shit you said you were going to do, right? So inside of that, it encompasses accountability. It encompasses everything. So when you start getting people inside of your organization and you're trying to hold each other accountable, you just simply lean back into that. Like, hey, look, we're supposed to do the shit we said we were going to do. You said you were going to do this. Why didn't you get it done? How can I help you get it done? What's in the way of you getting it done, right? And then you just start to build off of that, right? So it really discipline is like the cornerstone of any entrepreneur trying to go somewhere.
I love it, man. I absolutely love it. Share an example of how these values help you navigate challenges in your day to day right now.
Well, I mean, it's as simple as like the days when you feel like you don't want to do it, right? Like this morning, I there was no way in hell that I felt like getting up and going and working out in 115-degree heat out here in Arizona.
I know. I was just in Phoenix last week, and I actually stayed at the Clarendon out there. I'm sure, I don't know if you're familiar with it. It's like a famous hotel in Phoenix because they're 420 friendly. But I don't know how you. I just when I was done doing what I had to do, I just camped out in the air conditioning. I was like, I'm not being outside right now. No, thank you.
Well, right, but you think about it like when you didn't have a choice, right? Think about when you didn't have a choice. We were in MOP level 4 in Iraq, man. Same fucking thing.
Yeah, yeah,
And I'm running around the fucking desert, doing whatever because you didn't have a choice. So stop giving yourself the choice to not do it, right? And that's really the big thing inside of everything that you do. If you can just not give yourself the choice to not do it, like it changes everything.
sure does. Yep. It's if the choice to not do something is just simply not there, life gets better. It really does.
Well, and I
What?
mean, imagine think about the things that you do for other people, right? How many times have you dropped everything to go help out a friend, to go help out a family member, right? How many times have you dropped your own shit that you needed to get done to go help somebody else out? But how many times have you dropped somebody else's shit to do something for yourself, right? You have to fill from a full. You have to invest and give to other people out of a full cup. If you're constantly operating on empty, you're going to burn out.
Man, that's such a good message. I'm glad you pointed that out because I think a lot of times we, as business owners and just as people in general, we forget to put ourselves first. And that's been in the last year since my ayahuasca journey. That's been the one thing that I've hung on to is I have to put myself first and be selfish a little bit or a lot bit really. And just realize that me being selfish is actually the best thing I can do to help others.
Dude, it's what goes right along with selfless, right? You have to be selfish to be selfless. Like so many people are you get all these righteous Bible thumpers that say that you can't go make money, you can't do these things. Well, guess what? Your church is making money, right? How's your church functioning? They're making money. We're making money, and I can tell you that I can help a lot more people with $1 million than I can with $1, right? So it's what you do with the money that you make that makes a difference, right?
For sure. I like to
It's
look at money as just a byproduct of helping people. Like if you put enough good into the world, the byproduct of that is monetary rewards so that you can help more people. Oh, I love it, man. I love it. What's been one of your biggest challenges you've overcome in building all of your businesses?
oh, I mean, definitely the biggest challenge was my ego, but I mean,
Dude, and that's a perfect answer because I actually think I was just talking to my team today. I want to create a t-shirt. My favorite saying, I don't know that I coined it, but it's get out of your own way. Getting out of your own way. And that's become my slogan. So it's just going to be a t-shirt that says get out of your own way because I think it's such a perfect message. It'll stop people like, what does that shirt even mean? Right. But like you're saying, your own ego, that's you getting out of your way.
yeah, 100%. And then I guess, the mindset shift, right? Of being this employee to being an entrepreneur, which I guess was something that we were talking about prior to the call that I stopped myself on. My wife, my wife had this huge blockage of like, hey, you got a paycheck every month coming from these guys. Like, it's consistent. It's there. It's guaranteed is how she felt. Um, and getting her to shift her mindset along with me of I'm more in control now of my income than I ever was then. They could have fired me at any moment, any time. They could have closed the business. I had zero control over the business. I had zero anything, right? As much as I felt like I was in control, I had zero control. I didn't own it. They could have shut me down at any moment in time. But getting her to shift that mindset and see it from another angle that, hey, I have opportunity here to create whatever I want, however I want, whenever I want, right? And she really liked the time off aspect, almost to the point where that was another tough thing. Well, you're the boss. You can just take time off. You can just go do this. You can just go do that. And there's nobody you have to answer to. Well, my our bank account I have to answer to, right? We still got bills. So I can't just burn a customer and tell them, go to hell because you want to go on vacation. Like we need to still be strategic and plan a vacation and do things that way.
You can just do it more frequently when you're the boss. That's just it. You're in charge of your own time. And it's funny that you bring that up, that story with your wife, because I also, another similarity, but when I first got out of the Army, I was looking for work before college started and all of that. I actually interviewed with Toyota, and I was one of like 50 to get the job as a salesman. And I had a couple of VA appointments that I had to go to at the same time training was going to start. And they flat out told me, like, no, we're not going to make accommodations for you. And I was like, well, I don't want to work for a company that's not going to let me, go get some medical care that I'm entitled to because I did something that 1% of the population will do. You know what I mean? And it speaks to what you just said. It's like, I control my own time. And yes, I'm accountable to myself. I'm not accountable to anybody else. So that does come with a load more responsibility, and that you now have enough rope to hang yourself, and you can hang yourself real fucking quick. You know what I mean? And I'm learning, I won't say I'm learning a hard lesson because I did work while I was on my trip for the last 10 days, but I could have done more work that I wouldn't have had to deal with this morning and felt a little overwhelmed. However, I got caught up. It's fine, but that's just part of it. Like, you have to understand that when you're in charge of yourself, that's exactly what it means. Like, you are the boss. So every decision that you make is going to affect you in some way, negatively or positively. Oh, so good, man. So good. Wrapping it up here, my man. Based on your experiences, what advice would you give to veterans who are transitioning out?
Oh man. Don't stay stagnant. Don't find yourself in a hole of which it's an easy hole to be in because the whole time we're in, that's the alcohol hole of the easy thing to get your hands on. But I think that I don't get lost in not having purpose, because we come home and you got this high speed and everything happening and everybody having a mission for you to go on. Create your own mission, right? Find a mission and create your own mission and go attack it like you did in the military. That's probably the best advice that I could give is, don't go down the drinking hole. I haven't drank in 7 years, not because I did a bunch of stupid shit, which I did. I call it a bottle of bad decisions now.
Yeah, yeah.
But it was like this. I found this 90 days of sobriety really cleared some things up to me. I felt better. I looked better. I wasn't as tired. I didn't find myself apologizing. Right? It was not telling you that sober's the answer, but I'm telling you that don't let it get out of control. Right? Own it from the beginning, because it's a real slippery slope that I see a lot of people go down. And I mean, shoot, I get phone calls multiple times a week from friends that are down that hole and can't seem to find their way out of the victim mentality. Right?
Yep. That's why I hate Facebook groups.
Right. And that's the other thing is don't be a victim, right? Own what you can control, because so many, like, this year we've got all this crazy shit happening. We got the assassination attempts. We've got a president that just stepped out of the race. We got all this crazy stuff happening, and everybody will get so caught up in the news and all the bullshit that they can't control, instead of focusing on the things that they can, right? So own the shit that you can control and let the other shit go. There's nothing you can do about it. Just let it happen, because all you can do is what you can control.
Yeah, and if you really want to control it, then start making that effort now to put yourself in a position like Mr. Keller here did, so that you can control it and make change. Because, yeah, I used to be guilty of the same thing, watching the politics shit on social media, get fucking super angry, like where has common sense gone? And then before you know it, you're just a fucking wreck. It just an angry ball of rage that just is not productive. I love that, man, because it's so true. Now, advice for aspiring entrepreneurs based on, your story and, the humble beginnings that you have and just working your ass off. You didn't need certifications. You just did it. What advice would you have for those who are interested in entrepreneurship and didn't know it was an option?
So that's probably the easiest one, right? Some of the biggest businesses that I run into, the owners are probably some of the dumbest people I've ever met in my life. Which you would look at and go, well, that's kind of rude. But the here's the explanation: is these people, they don't get caught up in all the fray, the bullshit, the could be's, the things that could happen. They don't overanalyze, right? And on the other hand, I've also seen some of the smartest people that I've ever met in my life making 30, 40 grand a year working for somebody else. And the reason for that is because action is what creates things, right? Take action, move, actually make an impact. Because when you get caught in that analysis paralysis, it's over. You're not going to go anywhere. And that's what I've experienced with a lot of these guys, right? So these entrepreneurs, when I say they're the dumbest people I know, they're not the dumbest people. They take action. They're action takers. They don't get caught up in the bullshit, right? They just move. What's the next thing? Let's go. What's the next thing? Let's go. And they're creating these things at such a huge level that you just can't. There's nothing really that you can say about it, right? They're just creating.
Well, and I'll have to use myself as an example for this, following that, because you're absolutely right. Taking action. I started taking significant daily action on November 5th, 2023. It's now July 22nd at almost 1,700. I started on LinkedIn. I grew my following from 92 in November to over 3,200 by the end of this week. I'm in the top 2% of all hosts in the world on Podmatch. I'm now a director of recruiting on a nonprofit because I took action. I have partnerships on a podcast that is making no money right now. I have an opportunity to switch to an exclusive podcast host that's happening next month when that episode comes out and all of that, which will then, it's just been an amazing ride just taking action. And it's like, I get excited every day to get up and see what action I take leads to where now. And it's just so cool to see this whole process unfold. And believe me, you won't know what the fuck you're doing ever. You're just never going to know what you're doing ever again. But I promise you, just taking action will inform decisions that lead you down the right path. Is that something that you can agree with?
Oh, 100%, man. I mean, so many people get caught up in, this is where I'm at and this is where I'm going. Or they don't even look at where they're at, right? They just, oh, this is where I want to go. And then they see the chasm between, and they get so lost in the chasm that they don't take any action. And the best thing that you can do is just figure out the one simple thing that you can do to get started, and the rest will just start happening.
It does. It does.
Just
I'm so glad to have somebody else echo that too, because I can say it till I'm blue in the face, but hearing somebody else say exactly what I'm saying, hopefully it carries some more weight, because it's genuinely true. I didn't know what I was doing. I started on LinkedIn posting bullshit, throwing shit at a wall, seeing what would stick. People would DM me. They would want to book a meeting. I would learn from them. I would be asked to join communities. I would learn even more. I would implement things that I was learning. And then boom, before you know it, here we are having a conversation. It's so cool. Tell everybody where they can find you, how they can hook up with you if they're interested in any of your coaching services, all that good stuff.
Yeah, you can email me at Derek, DERIC, at exitmomentum.com or battlefieldboardroom.com. You can go to either one of them websites and find me on them and contact me there. But shoot, you could even shoot me a text or call my phone, 307-371-3683. I'm always down to help out in any way I can.
I love it, brother. What are some of the major goals and aspirations in the next few years for you and your companies and all that good stuff? Are you just kind of riding the wave, going to see where it goes?
No, well, you can't just ride the wave. You definitely got to have that homing beat, right? With Exit Momentum, we're looking at being one of the top 5 implementers out there for business operating systems. We want to crush EOS because I think it's a joke. But that's definitely our big thing that we're chasing with Exit Momentum. Then on the Battlefield Boardroom side, I've got a couple of big things coming. I've joined forces with the AFF, the Allied Forces Foundation. We went over to Scotland. We're going to do a lot of big things where we're able to give these veterans a framework to operate from. Not just go out and go on a hike and connect with people, but once you do that, then you get to come home and have some tools to take home. So we're going to incorporate Battlefield Boardroom with the AFF. I've got the FAM project and HOA.com out here that are, helping put our services out there and help some of the local veterans around here. So we're really just trying to grow, man.
I love it, brother. Ladies and gentlemen, I give you Mr. Derek Keller. Please help me get this podcast to 1 million downloads before I turn 40 on May 9th, 2025. I want to get this in front of as many veterans as possible. Also, if you're interested in being a part of the crisis response team for QRF Up to help fellow veterans and first responders in crisis, keep them out of jail and from taking their own lives, reach out to me. I'll be glad to provide you all the information I have with that and get you on a part of that team. Again, Mr. Derek Keller, thank you so much for being here, brother. I really appreciate it.
Thank you, man. I appreciate you having me.
Yeah, brother. Take care, everybody. We'll see you next week. That's our show, and I'm truly thankful you've joined us at the Strategic Veteran. If our conversation today sparked curiosity or if you're ready to elevate your game, I'm here to help. Visit thestrategicveteran.com for exclusive show notes and resources or to book a coaching session directly with me. Take a moment to subscribe to our podcast and share your review. Your support makes all the difference. For more insights and daily strategies, let's connect on LinkedIn and keep the conversation going. Remember, this isn't just a podcast, it's your strategic advantage in action. Until our next rendezvous, stay bold and continue the mission.